Well, it's that time of year again. It's the countdown to the NHL Trade Deadline. That's Dennis Bernstein. I'm David Pagnotta. And our coverage here on the fourth period will carry on over the next several weeks leading up to March 8th on D-Day. DB, let's dive right into this.
Sure.
On Friday, there was talk of Casey Mittelstadt being available in Buffalo. Now, depending who you talk to, the Sabres say they aren't actively shopping him. Teams around the league are saying he's available. So this is going to be an interesting little scenario. It doesn't necessarily have to happen before the deadline, but he is a restricted free agent. He's got arb rights. The Sabres are looking for a talent-for-talent kind of swap here if they can pull something off. He's their leading scorer. This is going to be an interesting one.
You see those feathers flying around? That's the feathers that you ruffled, I think, on Friday, Dave. So, he's their leading scorer, but let's be real. Tage Thompson would be the leading scorer if Tage Thompson wasn't hurt. The most disappointing team in the league. I had him as a top 3 team in the Atlantic. This was going to be the year, Dave. The team was going to break through, and they didn't. So now you hear conversations about a 25-year-old who's really emerged. Last season was his breakthrough year. I think he had 59 points. This year, he's following up with another solid season. He's a +8 for a team with a negative goal differential. So, but it would have to be a situation where you're getting established talent, right? They don't need any more futures in Buffalo. They need the present, right? So if you're going to do that, it's really got to be a quote-unquote hockey trade for Casey Mittelstadt. But I don't know. I think you'd want to reward the guys who are actually producing for this team as opposed to the guys who are underproducing. But we'll see what the next couple of weeks head up for Kevin Adams.
Yeah, he's got a lot to deal with. Eric Johnson is out there. Gergensons is out there. Olofsson is out there. And a lot of these guys on our trade watch list as well. As we shift to a team that's looking at a few players on the trade watch list, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Yep. Brad Treliving has been doing the rounds over the last week. And yes, he's interested in Chris Tanev, and he's got his
forever, Dave. He's been interested in him forever.
Right, exactly. Him, Sean Walker, a few others, Ilya Lyubushkin, kind of spreading things out. But my understanding is he's not exclusively looking for guys on expiring contracts. And one name that I'm very curious about, he had interest in him when he was the GM of the Calgary Flames. Colton Parayko comes with a big $6.5 million cap hit. He's got a lot of term on his contract. And while he does have a full no-trade clause, St. Louis has been exploring the possibility of moving him along with Torrey Krug, whom they almost traded last summer. And there's some chatter that Toronto has at least poked around to see what that might take. So we'll see kind of how things go from there. But this is going to be an interesting one, DB. The Blues in the thick of things in the wild card race in the West. This could be a different kind of hockey type trade.
Yeah, well, certainly Colton Parayko is a guy that Toronto would need on that back line. Without question, fills the need. But the Blues said, not so fast. Maybe it's 2019 Redux, Dave. Maybe it is. Because they got red hot with Drew Bannister behind the bench. They scored a touchdown yesterday, to use a Super Bowl analogy, in Montreal. I'm not sure you want to break up that team right now. So a deadline deal for Colton Parayko? I don't know. If it falls apart again, they miss the playoffs, then you could certainly explore that. But that would be dicey. And again, that would have to be established talent, right? I mean, St. Louis is in the thick of it. They're an older team. Bennington's bounced back. So it's going to be really interesting to see. And I always go back, Dave, to what Dean Lombardi told me way back in the day. I want a sign from my team that they need help at the deadline. Now, the Blues are sending all the signals to Army that we need help. We want more. We don't want to trade away. We don't break up this team. But it's going to be interesting to see over the next month how the Blues play, and does that open up Parayko for a trade?
Yeah, certainly. This team right in the thick of things, as I mentioned, Toronto trying to solidify third spot in the Atlantic Division. This could be an interesting one. We do know the Blues want to free up a little bit of money, especially on that back end. We'll certainly keep tabs on what happens here, and maybe that does escalate. Shifting a little bit to the Dallas Stars, DB, we know that Dallas likes their forward core. They're strong in net with Ottinger between the pipes. But this is a team that I'm told will make an addition on their back end by the time they hit the trade deadline. It really comes down to whether it's going to be a depth piece or if they can get their hands on a top 4 right shot defenseman. Doesn't necessarily have to be a rental, although another team in the Tanev race, shocker. But it wouldn't surprise me if Jim Nill does something a little bit bold here and tries to really solidify that back end. They'd like to do it. Not exactly sure on the additional options outside of the rental market,
Mm-hmm.
but this is a team that I was told wants to add, and if they can go big game hunting on that back end, they'd like to do it.
Yeah, and you mentioned Lyubushkin as one option. Another option that nobody's really talked about, Dave, because I think you're getting a situation right now where some teams are going to get more desperate. There's not a lot of inventory. So you're looking at guys with term, like, or 1 year remaining on the deal. And a guy I really like who, maybe they pull it off again with this type of player is David Savard in Montreal. He's got 1 year left. He's less than a $4 million cap hit. He's a sturdy right-handed defenseman. And remember, back in the day, Tampa traded for him. He's part of the championship team in Tampa, so he had the experience of a long playoff run. That might be another option, but I agree with you. I have Dallas going to the Cup final against Carolina. You don't need to add anything more up front, without question. I think one more insurance policy on the right side would certainly make sense for Jim Mill and Pete DeBoer.
Another guy that's going to draw interest, has already drawn interest, and you always look for the bottom feeders because teams like to vulture in and try to, kind of scoop some pieces away. And one of the pieces that a lot of teams are kind of looking at, their captain, the Blue Jackets captain in Columbus, Boone Jenner. And this is a player who's got some term left on his contract. He's a guy that brings physicality, can play offensive. He had a great time over All-Star Weekend, DB. There are some teams that you think could be of interest.
Absolutely. If you look at the Rangers, Filipino's not coming back. Unfortunately, he's back home with concussion issues, so he's not going to be returning. Would be a great fit. And another team would be Colorado. And I'm not sold on a second line, Dave. It's funny to talk about Georgiev and they like what he's doing. He wins games, but he's a sub 900 save percentage. Don't kid yourself. This year's Colorado Avalanche, as good as they are, isn't close to what they had when they won a championship. That second line with Naz Kadri and Brandon Saad, that was a way better team. So I think you're going to need more. Now, you might go and get a backup goaltender, which you probably need anyway in Colorado, but Boone Jenner, either a 2 or 3 if you move Johansson down to the 3C. But this is a guy, the issue is he's your captain. He's a leader in the room. He's got a great cap hit. So if you want to make other moves in Columbus, would this be the guy to leave? Like Parayko, would this be the guy to trade when you have other options to trade? But again, if I'm one of these teams like the Rangers of Colorado, I would be hot and heavy for Boone Jenner. He'd be a perfect ad for them.
He'd be a perfect ad for a lot of teams. I got to imagine if they are seriously considering moving him, teams like Edmonton, Toronto might enter the mix as well. We got a lot of coverage here over these next 3.5 weeks leading up to the trade deadline. We're going to get more of this type of content every day. That's Dennis. I'm Dave. We'll catch you tomorrow.